Okay, I'm doing a critique of a video of a debate between Fight the Flat Earth, Reds Rhetoric, and Bumpy Earth. Red is trying to make a graph here to represent angles from the ground to Polaris, and he's making the claim that they won't work on a flat Earth. Now, his green line across is what he would consider the flat Earth. This is an orthographic view. He has a problem here. He plots his locations incorrectly. What he has is he has Lisbon, Portugal at 38 degrees, and he has somewhere in Oregon at 42 degrees. Now he has the Lisbon one is the one on the left at 38 degrees. But then he plots the Oregon one at 42 degrees to the right of it, which is the opposite way he should have gone. He should have had Oregon on the right side and Lisbon on the inside. If his vertical line on the left-hand side of the graph, you go up, and that's where Polaris, his angles are drawing up somewhere up there towards Polaris. Well, the further out, Polaris would be 90 degrees straight up from north. So North Pole is 90 degrees. Equator would be 0 degrees latitude. So anyhow, that means the number on the inside angle from the ground would be a higher number the closer it is to Polaris, and a lower number the further away from Polaris. He has this backwards. He has the lower number closer to Polaris, and he has the higher number inside angle further from Polaris. It's just the opposite. He did this wrong. He did his graph completely wrong. He's going to add a third point a little bit later, and I believe that one was his location in Florida. And he's going to plot that one closer to Polaris than the other two, and it will be at 28 degrees from his location in Florida. It should have been plotted somewhere to the far right of the first two locations he plotted of Lisbon and Oregon. Reds is going to make a fool of himself, and so is Fight the Flat Earth, because they're going to treat the flat earther they're debating as if he's an idiot because he doesn't understand their graph. Well, of course he doesn't understand it. It's completely backwards.
Two degrees for Southern Oregon or whatever. So with this, don't know why there's an end there, but with this, I went ahead and plotted out these 2 points. Now these points are, if we were to stack them on top of each other, would be 364 kilometers apart. So that's where I put them. A is at 0, and observer B is 364 meters. B is going to represent the...
He put them backwards. The one on the right should have been plotted where the one on the left is, and the one on the left should have been plotted where the one on the right is. But we'll just overlook that, won't we, Red?
Southern Oregon location. So I went ahead and plotted this out. I put this one at 38.72 degrees, but this line at 42 degrees. And here's the thing. If we were to zoom out...
So here he's going to pretend he's moving away from this. And what his thought is that if they were correct, these two lines should merge. And they would, except for he plotted them backwards. So they won't, because Reds screwed up. They will keep on going further apart.
And keep zooming out. And keep zooming out. And we were to keep zooming out over. Right, so you must have done it wrong because it looks like they're getting further.
Now, if he would have turned those two lines around 180 degrees and put the one on the right onto the left and the one on the left onto the right, his lines would have merged. But he didn't.
Apart. Yeah, these lines are actually getting further and further apart. So, as you can see, as I go further and further up and out, like
as he goes further and further out like this, those lines will appear to separate more, right? Yes, because he plotted it backwards. If he had plotted it correctly, they wouldn't have. They would have merged. They would have come to a point where they touched, which would be where Polaris is.
They get further and further apart, which means in order for this observation to work on a flat Earth, the object that they would have to be looking at must be in two different places at the exact same time.
Wrong, Red. If you would have plotted them correctly, they would have met Polaris. It would have worked, but you didn't. You did it wrong.
Time. Fascinating. But yet we know that these angles work in reality. Gee, I wonder why.
Yes, they work in reality when everything is plotted in the right spot. You did it backwards. But Red will keep on going and digging himself in deeper. And of course, Craigie is sitting there on the side like a little puppy, all excited because he thinks he's screwing the flat earther. But he's not. He's making a bigger fool of himself. You know, Craigie is supposedly Red's boss now, and Red is just an employee that Craigie pays. Did any of you know that?
Could it be that, I don't know, this more accurately describes reality?
He's going to say this describes reality. This is his circle Earth, where he's got two locations, and he's got the angle, and they're parallel with a straight up and down line at the center of the circle going up vertically to where Polaris would be. None of those lines are going to ever match. They're never going to come to a point, but he's not going to show you that. He's not going to go up in elevation to show where they merge, because they don't. What he is going to do is he's going to back away from it to make it all converge together, because that's what distance does. It'll look like those lines are all getting closer and closer to each other. But that's not reality. The reality is if he would go up in elevation and look up, those lines would never merge to a point.
So what happens if you zoom out there? Do they? If I zoom out there, let's zoom out. Let's zoom out. Oh look, they get closer. They get closer. Oh, closer. That's weird. It's almost like they're converging to a point. They are converging to a point. It's really fascinating. Now I did put this star at quite a distance, but if we were to keep zooming out and zooming out and zooming out and zooming out, you would see that these 2 points would converge. These 2 lines would converge to a point.
How far away are you? How far away would you be from Earth?
Why does your mic sound shy all of a sudden? Why does your mic sound like you're inside a tin can's asshole?
Can you hear me?
Barely. You're technologically illiterate, so I understand.
Can you hear me better?
No, you sound like you're inside a tin can. Yeah, or an asshole.
Off the call.
See, this is what guys like Craigie and Red do. They ridicule the other person, and they try to frustrate the other person in order to get them to just start saying dumb stuff. Even though all along Red and Craigie are saying dumb stuff with these angles that they're plotting.
go back.
Yeah, you hop on out and back in, I guess. But yeah, basically you get the idea. It's very fucking far apart. But yeah, that's exactly what we did with these two observations. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. I am going to put a third point on the flat graph. I'm going to put a third point on the flat graph. And when I do, I am going to come back. I'm going to screen share again, and we're going to see what happens to these sight lines. Do they?
It's funny watching Craigie smirk over there like he thinks he's really got one over on the flat earther. Well, in this case, he kind of does, because the flat earther doesn't quite comprehend what's going on here. He's in the middle of a show. This got thrown on him, and sometimes it takes a while to look at it and realize what they're actually doing. As far as Craigie and Red, I don't think they knew what they were doing. At least I'm going to give them the benefit of doubt to think that, because the other alternative is they know what they're doing and they're simply evil.
They converge? Do any of them converge on anything, or do we get yet another contradiction? Stay tuned.
By the way, they will merge if he plots them correctly. But he won't, because he's going to screw up even worse when he adds in his third location and plots it on the graph. Well, while Red is out getting his other location to plot on his graph incorrectly, I made a correct version. You see my vertical line on the left-hand side going up to Polaris. The bottom is the North Pole. The bottom line going across horizontally is the flat Earth. I drew the angles down. You can see Oregon is at 42. The next one to the right is Lisbon, Portugal at 38. And then the far one is Florida, which is Red said 28. So anyhow, I plotted it correctly because the larger number of angle or degree of angle should always be the one that's closest to the North Pole or Polaris. So I put Oregon first, I put Lisbon second, and Florida is farthest out. It's got the lowest number of degree angle up to Polaris. Now if you look, they're all pointing up and coming to a point on Polaris. If Red would have graphed his graph correctly, that's what he would see. But he didn't. Now, here's another question for Red. Maybe he can answer it. This graph should be able to help you understand where, or the height or elevation of Polaris. This is a right triangle, right? So anyhow, you have the vertical line up. You have the baseline, which is ground level. And then let's say you got his Florida angle there, 28 degrees. So if you know the amount of miles from his place in Florida to the North Pole, and you know the angle, the inside angle up to Polaris, I'm assuming there's a way then to calculate the height of Polaris for that angle to reach it and intersect above the North Pole. I'm not a mathematician. Red claims to be. Maybe he can give me what that number would be, because I have a feeling that's what the height of Polaris would actually be. Okay, he's back with his third angle, and it's clear on the left, which is the opposite side of where it should be. He continues to make his mistake and doesn't even realize what he's doing. Or he does, and he's just a deceitful liar.
Perfect. Okay, so what I did is very simple. We have 42 degrees indicated in South Oregon. Thank you very much to that lovely person in the live chat. 38.72 degrees in Lipson, Portugal, and Astronomy Live. Thank you very much. 28 degrees in Tampa, Florida. These points are the correct distance apart. They are to scale as they would be in reality.
No, he may have drawn the actual inside angle correctly, but he plotted the location in the wrong place on all of them.
These are to scale. The separation is to scale. So here you can see the 42 degrees, the 38.72 degrees, and the 28 degrees of Florida. Why are they on the same?
You just heard him, and he plotted them all incorrectly. The inside angle should have a higher number the closer it is to Polaris, not a lower number. He's got it backwards.
Line. Because I'm modeling them on a flat earth, dumbass. Shut up and look. If I were...
No, he's not modeling them correctly on a flat earth. If he would have done it correctly, it would have worked.
Be quiet, be quiet. Hold on. If you talk once when you get muted while Reds is explaining, you do not get to interrupt him.
See, this is what they do. They mute anybody who tries to ask a question to further the conversation in the right direction, because they want to have it go the way they want it to go. They're very rude.
I'm trying to ask him a question. You can ask questions after I'm done explaining. Yeah, you keep it quiet while he is talking or you get muted. I modeled this to scale with...
Craigie literally sounds like an obnoxious teenager.
Actual real-life observations that have actually been done. We just did this. Now, if I were to zoom out and drag...
He's going to zoom out and he's going to say, look, it doesn't work. They're not all merging together. Well, of course not. Red, you plotted them incorrectly.
Oh, look, the lines get further and further apart from each other.
Oh, look, Red, they get further and further apart from each other, which is going to happen when you plot them incorrectly.
And if I were to keep going like this, the lines would be so spread out that eventually they're off the fucking charts. That's not what we see in reality. So basically, if we want to plot equatorial telescope mounts on a flat Earth, that's what this is. This is modeling a flat Earth. We get...
It's not modeling a flat Earth because he plotted his graph incorrectly with the locations.
Contradictory answers when we are pointing our telescope supposedly at the same object. How can one object be in three different places at the exact same time? Fucking magic, I suppose.
No, Polaris stays at the same place. But when you plot your graph wrong, none of these are going to converge to a point because you're ass backwards.
All three of those lines aren't pointing at the same object, though. That's the point. They're all looking at the same object in our example. What are they looking at? Polaris. But they're not all pointing at the same position. Yeah, that's the contradiction. If you were, in order to look at Polaris...
They would have been pointing at the same point if Red had plotted them correctly, which he didn't. Now you ask me, why do you keep repeating that? Because I want you to see it. It's this obvious. Red is an idiot, and so is Fight the Flat Earth, who is supposedly Red's boss now. The boss should recognize the mistakes of those he employed. But evidently, Craig
have lines
In order to look at, Polaris in Portugal, you would have to angle it at 38.72 degrees. And in Oregon, you would have to angle it at 42 degrees. All of these points are looking at the same object, which is Polaris. However, we can see that if modeled on a flat Earth, they give contradictory answers to the direction of Polaris.
But they won't give contradictory angles to Polaris if you plot them correctly. Red.
Well, show Polaris on that graph.
But we can't tell where it is because they're not pointing at the same place. They're not pointing. That's the point. You can't point at Polaris. And in reality, they are. Yes, in reality, they are.
In reality, they are, Craigie. But you have to plot your graph in reality. You didn't. Red didn't. Neither one of you noticed. Until after I pointed it out in the comments section. Here's a reply to a comment I made, how Red graphed everything incorrectly. And as you can see, Craigie replied back to me. And he said, yes, Red did it backwards. But it still makes the observation from an EQ mount impossible on a flat Earth. No, it doesn't. Not at all. If you would have plotted all those things correctly, it all would have worked.
They are. Show me in reality.
So this isn't reality?
No, it's not because it's modeled on a flat Earth.
No, it's not reality because Red plotted it incorrectly for the flat Earth.
No shit, it's not reality. The angles that were gathered.
Yeah, no shit, Red. It's not reality. You plotted it incorrectly.
From reality, okay? But when you plot them onto a flat sea level, you do not get them back to reality.
Where's Polaris in this graph?
In Florida,
By the way, all the angles to Polaris are based on sea level. If you went up in elevation from any latitude point, it would change the angle you see Polaris in relation to the horizon. So yes, all of them are based on sea level.
Okay, let's answer this question one at a time. In Florida,
I just asked you a question.
We're answering the question. We are answering the question. Please mute him. Please mute him. I am going to get to...
Here they go, mute him again. Then when the guy quits because he keeps getting muted or overtalked, they call it a rage quit. No, I wouldn't call it a rage quit. I would just say he quit because these guys are idiots and it's pointless to argue with idiots.
The answer without interruption. Polaris in Florida is 28 degrees above the horizon.
And his plot on the graph there for Florida should have been clear on the right side of the graph, not on the left side. It has the lowest amount of degrees in the angle to Polaris, which means it's further, not closer.
Portugal, Polaris is 38.72 degrees above the horizon. In Oregon, Polaris is 42 degrees above the...
And he did the same thing in those two. Those two, the Lisbon and the Oregon, should have been reversed in order to plot it correctly on the graph.
Horizon. All of these lines are supposedly pointing to Polaris. However, we can see that they don't agree with each other. However, if you were to model the same observation on a globe, they would agree with each other. They would all be pointing.
If you would have plotted them correctly on the graph, they would have pointed all at the same point. When he did what he did right here by going up in altitude, it spread them apart because he had them incorrectly plotted on the graph. He had them all backwards. If anything, he'd probably get the merge point if you followed these lines down, because he did it backwards.
In the same direction. This shows that there is a contradiction with the flat Earth model that the globe model solves. Imagine that. Now you may ask your question.
You have to unmute yourself first. Where is the horizon on
They are.
Polaris?
Yes, in reality they are.
Show me
in reality.
So this isn't reality?
No, it's not, because it's modeled on a flat Earth. No shit, it's not reality. The angles that were gathered come from...
No shit, it's not reality, because Red plotted it backwards.
reality, okay? But when you plot them onto a flat sea level, you do not get the matter reality.
Where's Polaris in this graph?
In Florida, okay, let's answer this question one at a time. In Florida,
I just asked you a question.
We're answering the question. We are answering the question. Please mute him. Please mute him. I am going to get through the answer without interruption. Polaris in Florida is 28 degrees above the horizon. In Portugal, Polaris is 38.72 degrees above the horizon. In Oregon, Polaris is 42 degrees above the horizon. All of these lines are supposedly pointing to Polaris. However, we can see that they don't agree with each other. However, if you were to model the same observation on a globe, they would agree with each other.
However, if you were to model correctly by plotting their positions in the proper place on the graph, they would have worked.
They would all be pointing in the same direction. This shows that there is a contradiction with the flat Earth model that the globe model solves. Imagine that. Now you may ask your question.
You have to unmute yourself.
You can solve the problem Red has shown by plotting it correctly. That would solve the problem, Red.
First. Where is the horizon on that graph?
There is so if I were to put the word to move it up like way over here, it would be closer to 45 degrees. However, where it is 28 degrees, which if you were in Florida.
However, if he would have put his Florida position on the graph far to the right where it was supposed to be, that angle would have matched. But he didn't, because Red is an idiot.
You would have to angle your telescope at 20 degrees in order to see Polaris. And it's different for Oregon and it's different for Portugal. But as you can see, even though they're all supposedly looking at the same object, they contradict each other. They don't converge to a point, they spread apart.
They don't converge to a point, and they spread apart once again because Red did it backwards.
This is the contradiction with the flat Earth model.
But they're not looking at the same object.
No, they are. They actually are. They just don't look like. In reality, they are. That's Earth.
Yeah. On a world with a flat sea level, you would have three different Polaris. That's the point of this observation.
Correct.
Okay.
So basically,
if the Earth was flat
Earth,
yeah, there would be a right. Move your cursor up, Reds. Oh, wait, what happened? Where'd that go? Did you stop sharing?
I stopped screen sharing.
All right, bring it back a sec. That's
bring it back. Okay, hang on a second.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty fucking trippy.
Right. So put your cursor up to 300, 3,000 elevation.
3,000 up like right here.
Yeah. Right, and go along to the left. Right, until you hit one of the lines. Right. Stop. Right. So if the Earth and sea level was flat, you would have a Polaris here now go along to the left. Polaris here, now go along to the left. And
there's only one Polaris.
Exactly. That's the point.
I don't even know what Fight the Flat Earth is mumbling about now. He's just digging himself into a bigger hole.
That's a contradiction. In order for the observations that we get in reality to make sense on a flat Earth, you would need multiple Polarises at the exact same.
In order for it to make sense, you would have to plot it correctly. If you plotted it correctly, it would make sense. But Red is here to confuse people by doing things backwards. And yet he seems to understand what he's saying, which makes me really wonder about him.
Time. How can
Polaris
this
side.
be possible?
What's the plural of Polaris?
Why are all those points on the same line?
This is the flat Earth that I plotted them on.
It's a different position though on Earth.
Yeah, no shit, sure.
You can see from this point right here that if they continued those lines downward, they would have all intersected, because Reds did it backwards. He would have the lines intersect on the other end. Isn't this hilarious?
That's because they're distance apart. So, for example, Florida is this far away from Portugal. Portugal is this far away from Oregon if you're talking the distance between the equator and the North Pole.
So what's the equator? The arbitrary line that they decided is in the middle. There's an equator in the middle.
There's no sense for this guy, and he still doesn't get it.
Breaking out the crayons.
I am literally breaking out the crayons for you.
It's not an atom, it's a fact. You don't even know what an atom is. It's a fact that we have to break out the crayons to explain.
So Reds is breaking out the crayons to show this silly flat earther how wrong he is. Reds should have left the crayons alone, because Reds went out of the lines when he was coloring by misplacing his location positions on the graph incorrectly. But who cares about that? Let's just forget that.
I literally color coded the ground for you, and you were like, "Where's the flat Earth?" It's a fucking green line, douchebag.
Yeah, but all these points are on the same line.
I think would be on a flat
We're
Earth.
modeling it on a flat Earth. We're showing you that there is a contradiction. The contradiction is that these.
They would be on the flat line. Red is correct about that. But they would also be plotted correctly in their proper positions, which he didn't do.
Lines are lines of sight. They're all supposedly looking at the same object, but yet they don't agree with each other. That's what happens.
Hold on.
They don't agree with each other because they're plotted incorrectly. If they had been plotted correctly, they would have agreed.
I think I know the problem here. He doesn't realize this is. He doesn't.
I got a little excited when we got to this point because I thought Craigie just realized the problem. I thought Craigie was going to say, "Oh, look, we plotted the lines incorrectly." But no, he doesn't say that. So my hopes were disappointed.
Realize this is an orthographic view. He's expecting there to be a circle for the flat Earth. I think that's the problem here.
No.
Well, then how do you not get?
First off, we don't see an orthographic view. So if that's an orthographic view, then that doesn't translate anything to reality.
Well, there's really no point in going any further. They just keep digging deeper into the hole that they dug for themselves. My challenge is for Red to show on Craigie's show the same graph with the locations plotted correctly on the graph. This should be funny. But I don't expect it to happen. I'm not going to hold my breath, even though Craig knows that Red plotted them incorrectly. as I showed you his reply to my comment earlier. Red Rhetoric and Fight the Flat Earth are idiots. I nominate the two of them in a tie for the Dumb F of the Year award.